ground is trembling, the skies grow red. Sudden strikes and the blood that's shed. Nations argue while the fires climb, yet a quieter voice still marks the time. Keep the oil burning, keep the wick trimmed low. The lampstands still stand where the olive trees grow. Through the shaking and the silence, through the rise and the fall, keep the oil burning, answer the call. Crowds that were dancing now scatter and run. Shadows move faster under the sun. Leaders gather behind closed doors, while the earth itself seems to cry out for more. Keep the oil burning, keep the wick trimmed low. The lampstands still stand where the olive trees grow. Through the shaking and the silence, through the rise and the fall, keep the oil burning, answer the call. Not by might and not by power alone, but by the Spirit who makes the heart know. Turn again, turn home, let the eyes be made new. For the one who was promised is coming for you. Keep the oil burning, keep the wick trimmed low. The lampstands still stand where the olive trees grow. Through the shaking and the silence, through the rise and the fall, keep the oil burning, answer the call. Keep the oil burning, even now.
I am digging the Middle Eastern Israeli guitar and sound. If you guys couldn't tell, the last couple of songs are kind of heading more towards Israel. It's kind of it's a unique, interesting sound. I think it's appropriate, especially when we're talking about so many things in regards to Israel. But that one's pretty good. This is probably another one of my favorite songs, Keep the Oil Burning. Surprisingly, the lyrics from that came from the news from the weekend, believe it or not. It's just I'm trying to make these songs evergreen songs so that we can listen to them forever. So it's so interesting to see how the abstract lyrics based on the current events comes out. I think that one slaps. It is, what is today? Today is Monday, July 27th. And welcome back to the Two Witnesses Live. I am your host, Watchful. We're going to be covering the news from the weekend, from July 25th through the 27th. Let's see what we got going on. Let's get straight into these stories. There we go. The United States has now paused airstrikes on Iran for a third straight day. President Trump says the halt came as Tehran's requests for diplomacy so that they can have some space. He told reporters the United States is in deep talks with Iran. If those talks do not work out, he warned the United States will return to very strong military action. Oops. Of course, oil prices dropped sharply on the news. Brent crude fell several percent into the low to mid 80s at points. If you're an aggressive trader, people got to be raking in the money. I mean, like the ups and the downs. Like, I don't know. I should get back. It makes me want to get back into my trading. Anyway, we'll stay away for now. I don't really need to. Anyway, Strait of Hormuz remains a flashpoint. Iran has tried to demand passage fees from tankers. Trump briefly floated a 20% U.S. reimbursement fee for securing the waterway, then reversed it after the talks with Gulf leaders. He now says no one should charge a toll for the straits. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is in Washington. He is meeting President Trump with Iran at the top of the agenda, obviously. Netanyahu warned that if Iran attacks Israel directly or through proxies with missiles or drones, Israel's response will be very, very forceful. Houthi rebels backed by Iran claimed missile and drone strikes on Saudi Aramco facilities in Janssen. Let's see. There you go. Let's see. In Janssen and Yondu over the weekend. Fires were reported at the large Jazan refinery. This was their first major attack on Saudi oil infrastructure since 2022. All right, moving on to the Correspondents' Dinner. The rescheduled White House Correspondents' Dinner took place Friday under heavy security. President Trump spoke for about an hour. He opened by condemning political violence and praising the Secret Service, including an agent wounded in the April shooting outside the original venue. Then he went after the press, as is his manner. Looking towards CNN's Caitlin Collins, he joked that he thought he saw her on a Bud Light can, but it was Dylan Mulvaney. Do you remember when they roasted him? He can take it and he can dish it out. And if that violates your sensibilities, so be it. Fire from the mouth, man. I think the comedy roasts probably prepared him for fire from the mouth, because boy oh boy can he really dish it out. Anyway, CNN issued a defensive statement about integrity. A New York Times reporter said it might be time to rethink the dinner, and the same media that laughed along for years under previous presidents suddenly could not handle the punchline. Trump derangement syndrome will do that to you. Moving on to violence in Seattle. On Sunday evening, gunfire erupted at the Bite of Seattle Food Festival near the Space Needle. 3 people were killed, a 19-year-old, a 44-year-old, and a 56-year-old woman. What a shame. 4 others were wounded, including a toddler. One suspect, a 15-year-old boy, is in custody. Police are still looking for the second person. Crowds ran for cover as the festival turned chaotic. Other shootings that same weekend left multiple people wounded in Chicago, Memphis, and Michigan. None matched the Seattle numbers or the national attention, though. Moving on to terror in Berlin. Saturday night in Berlin, a white van plowed into pedestrians on the edge of the Christopher Street Day Pride event in Tiergarten. 1 woman was killed. At least 29 people were injured, several critically. The driver fled on foot and continued attacking with a machete. Yeah. See how it goes. Where were we? Saturday night in Berlin, a white van. Okay, yeah. So 29 people were injured, several critically. The driver fled on foot and continued attacking with a machete. Authorities identified the suspect as 21-year-old Abdul Balaut, a German citizen of Lebanese descent. He was known to police for Islamist connections, had previously tried to join ISIS in Syria, and was in a de-radicalization program. After a nearly 24-hour manhunt, police located him in a Spandau garden. When he charged officers with a sharp weapon, they shot and killed him. German officials, including the Interior Minister and Chancellor Friedrich Merz, called it an Islamic terrorist attack. The rest of the Pride events were canceled. Let's see, massive fires. So this is Europe's wildfires. These forced huge evacuations across the southwestern France and central Spain. Roughly 250,000 to 300,000 people were ordered out, including nearly 200,000 in Bordeaux area alone. Authorities described it as one of the largest peacetime evacuations in French history. Homes and a campsite were destroyed. Smoke reached Madrid, and at least one death was reported in Spain. Both countries requested EU help as the blazes continue. Other stories, the White House is launching a Freedom Haulers campaign to put military veterans into commercial trucking jobs. What a genius idea. Tens of thousands of immigrant drivers recently lost their commercial licenses under stricter English proficiency and documentation rules. I haven't experienced this directly, but I've known truck drivers who have been angry about the lack of English-speaking truck drivers. I've also spoke to people who deal with truck drivers who've expressed very similar frustrations. So I'm glad that they're finally taking care of this, because in my indirect dealings with, it's not like I have involvement in the trucking industry, just friends and family who work in the trucking industry. It actually turned out to be a really great way for a friend to, he lost his job, lost his home, lost everything. He got into trucking and was able to get everything back. So it can be a wonderful thing. So I think this is really great that veterans can fill in the gap. Veterans who drove large military vehicles can skip the skills tests. The GI Bill covers full training costs. In New York City, so this is different story here. New York City in New York City, landlords sued to overturn the new rent freeze on about 1 million rent stabilized apartments. They argue the rent guidelines board ignored rising costs and delivered a political promise. And then meanwhile, 9/11 victims' families are circulating a petition to keep Mayor Zohran Mamdani away from the 25th anniversary ceremony at Ground Zero. Interesting. In Maine, Democrats nominated Troy Jackson for the U.S. Senate after their previous candidate collapsed. Jackson has begun using the word genocide for Israel's war in Gaza and pledging to end U.S. military aid. Some Jewish voters in the state say they feel politically homeless. Let's see. In other news, a large egg recall continues after salmonella was found in nearly 19 million eggs from Texas farms. The products reached multiple southern and southwestern states. And one piece of infrastructure good news: the long-awaited Gordie Howe International Bridge opened, linking Detroit to Windsor. Oops. It should ease a major trade bottleneck. Anyway, that is the picture. As of Monday, Iran talks remain fragile. Violence at home and abroad continues. let us stay watchful. We'll keep tracking these developments. And let's see, for today, I wasn't going to do a teaching because typically on Monday we spend so much time covering the posts of the two witness candidates. We'll just say that it usually lasts 3 hours. But I came across a video at the last minute that is going to shape our entire week. I'm very excited to review this video, and I'm excited for this series. We're going to call it The Beginning of Knowledge. So with that, we're going to listen to Bruising the Head of the Serpent while I get that set up.
I come in my own name. A shadow falls, a world aflame. I rise, I rule, I stake my claim. A serpent's coil, a deadly game. I build my throne, I seek my fame. I wear the crown, you bend the knee. I come in my own name. The temple's mine, the God is me. In my own name, I take the reign. A serpent's whisper, a world to change. Through the lies, through the pain, I claim the stars, I break the frame. I speak no truth, I blind.
I can only handle so much of that song. I really need to get into the guts of that song and pull out that piano, the ding, 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 ding. It's super appropriate for the song because it should be annoying when you're talking about the devil, the one who comes in his own name, but it kind of limits my ability to listen to that for very long. It would be nice to fix it. It's a good excuse for crappy instrumentation. Anyway, this segment is called The Beginning of Knowledge, how the world has been blinded by the lies about God and why waking up is the start of true knowledge. And the reason we're doing this is I've been thinking about the harlot that rides the beast in Revelation 17. And I've been seeing these exorcists go on podcasts lately and just lie through their teeth. We've talked about a lot of the things that they discuss, and I mean, okay, so maybe saying lying through their teeth, it might be a bit extreme. The knowledge that they're sharing, I believe, takes you further away from God. And it's the reason people are blinded, and I believe it's the reason people ultimately leave the church. And we're going to listen to a video from a scholar and a doctor and a pastor of a megachurch who got to the point where he realized he was teaching lies. And I put forth to you that that is the beginning of knowledge. When you begin to wake up from the lies, because there are many who are preaching a fantasy that's not even based on the scripture. It's a fantasy about the way many people believe things are, and the problem is there's a lot of different opinions. And this video that we're going to watch, he does a really good job communicating that blindness, and just how big it is. So we're exposing the harlot that rides that beast. And we're going to learn some things. We're going to learn about a world blinded by lies. We're going to learn about the deception, the blindness, and the system. It is a system. Many of us came out of it, myself included. I came out of this. I was raised to believe things a certain way, and it wasn't until I began to question how can I prove the things that I've been taught that I realized I was taught lies? And I mean, I believe many of you are in that same boat. And let's listen to this video before we get into more of these more of these slides. We'll go through the slides after we listen to him talk. So this is from Dr. Todd Phillips, the Deconstructed Pastor. This is a new channel. I'm very excited about the next video. We're not going to watch it today. We'll watch it tomorrow, and we're probably going to be responding to it all week. In the next video, he goes through many different questions, and we're gonna tackle those questions, because in the process of watching, I believe we have discovered answers to many of the questions that someone like Dr. Todd Phillips is looking for. It's that beginning of knowledge. So let's listen to him talk about his deconstruction, because he makes some really good points that we're going to comment on. This might seem scary at first. People might think I'm trying to discourage them from Christianity. To the contrary, I'm discouraging people from the lies.
Why I stopped believing in Christianity and what caused me to lose my faith. Hey, I'm Dr. Todd Phillips. I'm a scholar of the Bible and a former mega.
So just so it's clear, he still believes in God. He makes it clear towards the end of this video. What he's describing is losing his faith in the lie.
Church pastor here in the United States. I used to preach in some of the largest churches in the country, and now I'm an agnostic atheist. Now, what you're about to see are the 8 biggest reasons I no longer believe Christianity is true, but they're not the only reasons. And no single one of them ended my faith overnight. It was a cumulative weight of all of them over about 10 years. So the first...
I don't think he describes himself properly when he says he's an agnostic atheist. If you listen to this video, he makes it very clear that he still believes in God. It's just that he has a lot of questions. And he might be questioning whether he does actually believe in God. And I think that this is a good opportunity to address these questions, because, again, this is the beginning of knowledge. When you get to this point, I speak from experience. When you get to this point where you believe you know everything, you believe that you have been taught right, you believe you have all the right answers, and then as you start to discover what you believe cannot be substantiated, and in fact does not prove out to be true when put to the tests. And our goal is to get to what is true, and that is where he is getting to. We might even be able to get him on the show and talk to him, I hope. This may be the future of the shows, getting back into these discussions, specifically with people who are sick and tired of the fantasy, and they want to understand the reality. They want to have answers. Many of us have been there, and I believe that we're doing a good job here. And it's part of watching. This is part of why I believe Jesus told us to watch. It seems as though that grip from the harlot, that influence that the harlot has over the beasts, is breaking. And this, I think, is fruit of that breaking, that people are coming out of the fog and they want answers. And hopefully we can provide some answers.
3 deal with belief itself. Why people believe religions that they believe, why a God who supposedly wants a relationship with us remains hidden, and whether belief is even something that we can choose. What if I told you that religious belief is shaped almost entirely by geography? Here's how I discovered this truth and why it caused me, at least in part, to step away from Christianity. This is
a good point. To me, this reminds me of Zechariah 2, where God says he has spread us out throughout the 4 corners of the world. His chosen are spread. The children of Israel are spread throughout the whole world. And I think that our work with the beginning of knowledge here is going to go hand in hand with learning to understand the 12 tribes. And why else would God scatter us throughout the whole world if it wasn't to gain experience and knowledge from different perspectives? So he makes some really good points here. And again, this is about waking up from the fantasy and recognizing the reality as the beginning of knowledge.
Really a massive hurdle for me as a pastor. And it's something thinkers like Alex O'Connor, you should check him out. They talk about this a lot. It really breaks down into, I'd say, 3 uncomfortable realities. The first one is this kind of idea of the lottery of birth. Your GPS coordinates at your birth are the single greatest predictor of your religious identity. And the numbers are crazy. If you're in the US, 70% of people are Christian. But if you were born in Pakistan, 96% chance you'd be Muslim. In India, 80% chance you'd be Hindu. Poland is a 90% chance you'd be Catholic.
So first, I want to point out that it's interesting that these are territorial, to where in these places, as he says, GPS coordinates is the condensation of various beliefs. I believe that's telling. And a lot of those can be traced back to ancestors. So I fully believe that we're gonna learn some things about the 12 tribes, and as we discover where they've gone in the world as a majority, it's going to be revealing, number one, who they are. And God knew that. I believe that he knew this from the beginning. This is probably why this information is so important, because you remember, if you haven't seen the video from Friday, we read Genesis, I believe it was 49. This relates, the names and the understanding of the 12 tribes is important for the end times, probably for this. So he makes a very valid point. Where you're born determines what it is you believe. Does that mean you're not from the 12 tribes of Israel? No, it just means that you may have been born into some lies, and you need to wake up from those lies. Return. You need to come out of her. Come out of confusion. Babylon is confusion. So this is part of the coming out of and the waking up. It's almost kind of like Neo in the Matrix, waking up out of that cocoon.
Look, none of us chose our starting line, yet it almost entirely determines what we perceive as eternal truth. And the second is what I call the sincere seeker problem. I used to think about this a lot. If someone in Thailand is just as humble, just as prayerful, just as desperate for truth as someone in Texas, but they arrive at a totally different absolute truth, does it make sense to say one is right and the other's just lost? I don't think.
See, this is the problem with religion. This is one of the reasons why I harp on religion and labels. People use labels, and they use religion to isolate, separate, condemn, or praise. If you're with us, you're with us. If you're with them, you're against us, kind of mentality. And this is a very valid point. Just because someone in Pakistan believes something different than somebody in Texas, does that invalidate them as a good person? It's a good point. This is why I believe Jesus said the 2 most important commandments are to love God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. All religions have some form of God, right? But even in Christianity, and he's going to go through this in detail, there's so many different versions. How do you know which one's right? What's important through waking up is loving God and loving your neighbor as yourself. So your doctrine may permit atrocities, but if it violates loving your neighbor as yourself, you should probably hold off on those atrocities, because you may find that you're held accountable for those. Granted, there is mercy, there is forgiveness. One thing that he kind of misses also here is eternity. It's like, from his perspective, evaluating if there's a God or not a God, he's not taking into account the resurrection, and death is a thing that's being swallowed up in victory. So yes, there are people who have done tragedies, they have done terrible things, but have repented from the things that they've done. I do believe there is a level of forgiveness for them. Absolutely.
Think so. It started to feel like they weren't seeking a different God. from my perspective. They were just living in a different ecosystem.
Yeah, and that's my perspective. Is it's the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob is the creator of the heavens and the earth. Regardless of what label you want to give him, there is only one God. It's when you begin to give labels that separate and isolate that's the problem. That is a problem.
If a truth is actually universal, it shouldn't look like a regional dialect, right? An all-loving, all-powerful, universal God wouldn't design a system where your eternal destiny is almost entirely determined by which border you happen to be inside of. And for me, once I saw...
Yeah, I'm going to be stopping this a lot because he makes a lot of points that need to be addressed. Let's go back and revisit that.
And where your eternal destiny is almost entirely determined by which border you happen to be inside of. And
so not your eternal destiny. We might as well talk about this now. Is people have, because of the lies and the fantasy that most religions push for whatever reason, whether they believe it's true or whether they're doing it for nefarious reasons, for business, because a lot of religion is just business, to where those who are pushing it don't care about you. They treat it like they treat it as their job, their career. The God, and a lot of misunderstanding about God comes from the way we associate God with us, with ourselves. And rather than looking at God as the creator and being perfect and flawless, people try to bring him down to our level and associate attributes from humanity onto him. Which we're going to talk about this quite a bit off and on. But the reality is God is invisible and God is the creator of the system. He put the systems into place. They're perfect systems, and gave us warnings about what to do, what not to do. There were consequences to that warning. Adam and Eve, do not eat of the tree of knowledge of good and evil, for in the day you eat thereof thou shalt surely die. So living the consequences of those actions doesn't mean God is not an all-loving creator. So what makes him all-loving is the fact that he built in a fix for when we would make that mistake. And that is the seed of the woman would bruise the head of the serpent. So that is Jesus, who would ultimately triumph over death. So it doesn't exclude bad things happening. And even in a geography. So yes, we live in different regions. We have different beliefs. So that's the foundation of that discussion. Is there's a fundamental misunderstanding of the creator. A lot of it is because religion tries to put a blanket over the creator in order to identify his shape, in order to find attributes that they can associate with him. And a lot of them a lot of them do him an injustice in doing that. This is why I believe the very first commandment is have no other gods before me, and don't make any images of anything on the earth, the heavens, or the sea. Don't bow down to them, because when you start to do that, you start to isolate and separate people from God.
And for me, once I saw that my faith was mostly based on geography, I just couldn't unsee it. It moved me from a place of real certainty in my faith to a place finally of kind of honest empathy for the billions of people who are just as sincere as I once was.
See, to me, I hear he's finally learning to love his neighbor as himself. Religion stops you from loving your neighbor as yourself. When you're of the mindset that you're right and they're wrong, you're going to have a problem with them. And that is an issue. There's so many things in the scripture that indicate what it's going to be like in the end time. One of them is people finally realize to stop fighting. They turn their weapons into plowshares and start farming and working together. That's our ultimate goal. Is we need to realize we've been lied to. We believe lies that that the things that separate us, isolate us, and turn us against each other, That's a product of Satan. That is a product of the fall. That is a product that leads to death.
Another reason I stopped believing in the Christian God is the issue of divine hiddenness. When you look at the narrative of the Bible, God supposedly establishes this clear precedent of making himself known in very clear, objective ways, like burning bushes, pillars of fire. He walks with Adam and Eve in the garden. Eventually, he comes to earth supposedly as Jesus to perform undeniable miracles to prove who he is. Right? If those stories are true, then they prove one thing, that God is fully capable of providing objective, physical evidence of his existence without overriding our ability to choose him.
And this, again, to that point of why the first commandment is to have, number one, have no other gods before him, and to not ascribe an image to him. All those things that he discussed are ascribing an image to God. The burning bush was an angel. Jesus was only the image of God. He isn't the creator himself. So you and I can be the image of God when we obey him, when we do what is right, when we choose to cleave to the good rather than the evil. If you go around saying that you're the image of God and you do a bunch of evil, you're the image of Satan. You're not the image of God. You're not the image of the creator of the heavens and the earth. This is why we don't ascribe images, and this is why it's so important to not make an image of anything at all in heaven, earth, or the sea.
A common argument I used to preach, and I certainly...
The reality of it is evidence of God is so immense. It's quite literally everywhere. And we're so used to seeing it that we're numb to it. But when you begin to understand who and what God really is, then you start to see him in the creation. The mistake is to make the creation him. The creation is the product of his work. It is not him. Although, again, in the same way that Jesus is the image of the creator, so is the creation. The creation is the image of the creator because it reflects who he is, what he is. Does that make sense, or is that confusing?
I hear from Christians all the time to explain why God's actually silent today is that a direct revelation would somehow force us to believe and destroy our free will. But I just cannot tell you, that logic doesn't really hold up at any level. Knowing someone exists is not the same as being forced to love or even to follow them. Even in the biblical story, Satan has absolute objective knowledge that God existed, and he still chooses to rebel.
See, and this is where you can see the lies that he's believed that cause the confusion, is there's a fundamental misunderstanding of Satan. A lot of people, and this is where I was getting frustrated listening to these exorcists, where they're telling the story that you and I have heard most of our lives. And once you have actually studied those things and realized that what they're saying isn't even supported by the scripture, then you can start to say, that guy is probably lying. Like, there's a fundamental misunderstanding of who, there's no record in the Bible of a rebellion against God. That's a fallacy. And yet that is one of the most common descriptions of Satan falling from heaven and taking 2/3 of the angels with him. If you haven't heard me talk about that, we'll talk about it a lot this week. We'll go through and I'll prove it to you. But that is one of the reasons why he's confused, is because he's believed a lie.
So free will all over the place. If knowledge were the same as coercion, that rebellion wouldn't have been possible. Look, the reality is that an all-knowing God, from my perspective, would clearly know exactly what every single person on the planet would require to be convinced that he exists. He would know, for example, exactly what I need to see and know and understand, and exactly what I would need to get from him to believe he's there.
So again, this is kind of a fallacy, that you're attributing things to God that might be unsubstantiated, like this assumption that, God has to fit in this particular box. When the reality of it is we're living through the consequences of our ancestors. And the ultimate redemption is still future. That's why it's called the hope. But the fact that we have a knowledge of it gives us hope. And the fact that we're seeing evidence of it today, that's why we watch. There's so much value in listening to what Jesus said. So John 14:29, Jesus says, I tell you these things beforehand so that when they happen, you will believe. That's the point. And then he tells us that we are to watch, that when the master returns, he expects to find the servant watching. And everything in the book of Revelation, regardless of who wrote the book of Revelation, I understand that the authorship is disputed. That's fine. Here's the thing, though. The content is associated to Jesus, and the content is proving to have some value in our day and age, starting with the Revelation 12 sign, Revelation 12, 1 and 2. That is a sign that only happens one time exactly the way that it's described, which makes it an anchor point. So that sign up in heaven with a woman clothed with the sun, crown upon her head, and pain to be delivered, the moon at her feet, that tells us that what's written in the book of Revelation is written to us in this day and age. That is an indication that we are in that period of time, and then all of a sudden the puzzle pieces start falling into place. This is what we do on the channel. We've observed these things come to pass. If you're not aware of the timeline, we'll get into it this week. But there's evidence that Jesus is the Messiah because he is ascribed with communicating these things to us. As they come to pass, we believe. As the things he told us about come to pass, we believe and we understand. So there is evidence.
And yet he hasn't done that. If he's all powerful, he could provide that evidence right now.
Again, the evidence is being provided for those who actually have realized they've been lied to and have started to seek real answers. And I really do believe we've got answers here at Two Witnesses Live. That this is where you come when you're tired of the lies, you're tired of Babylon, you're tired of the confusion, you want to come out of the confusion and you want real, substantial answers, or at least plausible answers. I'm not saying every answer I've ever given is 100% correct. Some of them are pretty far-fetched, but they're the best I've been able to get to with the available information, such as who is Satan, who is the Antichrist, where are we in the end times, things like that.
Now, if a relationship with God is the most important thing in all existence, it just doesn't make sense that he'd remain hidden behind a veil of...
I don't feel that God has remained hidden. I feel that God has been with me my entire life, even in my darkest hour. That's just me, though. I feel I have a better relationship with him now that I'm actually confronting the lies that I was raised to believe. If anything, it just strengthens my relationship with him.
2,000-year-old texts and subjective feelings. And that's really what it comes down to. Look, a loving father doesn't keep himself hidden. He shows up. He provides for his...
Again, so this is trying to associate attributes to God that might not be the best at communicating what he is. When you try to associate human attributes to God, you come to these conclusions. This is why he says, don't make an image of me. While he is described as a father, and on a bigger scale, he's already taking care of us. That doesn't mean that we're not going to suffer the consequences of our actions or the actions of our ancestors. The truth of it is we die. That is the truth of it. I mean, that's the unfortunate reality, is that we do die. There's evidence that previous generations, have lived longer than us, but we seem to be limited to 125 years, which the Bible seems to give a reason for why that is. But I believe that part of the problem that confuses people is when you associate attributes to the Creator that he doesn't associate to himself, that's where you get issues. Does that make sense? That might be a little confusing. Let's continue.
children. If your child is about to run out in the street and get run over, you go out there and you grab them and you take over the control of that situation to save them from that death. A good father doesn't leave people alone, children alone, to struggle in the dark.
See, that's the thing is I don't think that's a proper understanding of God, that
For me, the idea
that he is going to he's not a helicopter parent, right? That's not my experience. I mean, I've been hurt and hit. There's been many times that I was miraculously saved, and I think that there is good evidence for angels. That is, some of them are directed or given charge to protect us in these situations. Some of us more so than others. But the reality is people have this idea that nothing is impossible for God, which isn't true. God can't lie. There are definitely things God can't and won't do. But there's this fake fantasy idea that he's describing, that if you believe these ideas about God. So this is actually a good one. So I was raised that you could control demons in the name of Jesus Christ. And there's been situations where people have been at the end of a gun, cast out, they said in the name of Jesus Christ, tried to cast out a demon, and that person lost their life. Why is that? There's things that we believe that are not true. And just because your belief is shattered does not mean there's not a God. It's mean you didn't understand God in the first place. There's a reason that my family carries weapons, because we are in a world that is dangerous, and we are allowed to protect ourselves, because we're under no misconception that God is going to send his angels to protect us in every single situation. If he does, that's fine. And I believe he has multiple times in my life. My mother likes to say that they're probably going to retire the number of my guardian angel. I've been hit by cars, electrocuted, fallen out of cars, fallen off of bridges. I've had so many life-threatening things happen to my life. That's a miracle that I'm alive. And many of us can say that. But there is a reality that we have to be aware of, and that is that bad things happen. They're allowed to happen. That, your idea of God protecting you in every situation, like as a loving father should, what he says, a loving father would sees a son walking out in traffic, he's going to stop him. Well, that's not necessarily the case. Yes, a loving father who is present with his child would probably stop him. But again, you're associating attributes, an image of, a human father with his child to the creator of the heavens and the earth, and it's causing you to have a misunderstanding of who the creator is. This is another reason why, my family takes martial arts is we want to be able to defend ourselves against somebody who would intend us harm. I don't claim to fully understand why all of that stuff is allowed to happen. I have a lot of theories, but that is the reality. And I believe that when you begin to understand God, that's when you begin to truly, that's the beginning of knowledge, is when you truly begin to fear and reverence who the creator is, not necessarily the lies that have been taught about him. So just because bad things can happen doesn't mean that I attribute those to the creator, in the same way that Job did not attribute those to the creator. In everything that happened to Job, and he had a lot of bad things happen to him. Lost his family, lost his donkeys, lost his property, lost it all. And in all of that, he never attributed those bad things to the creator. And I don't think we should either. You should just realize you need to have a better understanding of who the creator is. And at the same time, I do believe there's value in prayer. I do believe that there are angels and demons. I do believe that demons can cause problems. And when they do, they can probably be cast out. Likewise, angels. I do believe that angels can protect you, but that doesn't necessarily mean that there's a charge over everybody, that in all circumstances, in all situations, that they be protected. There's an argument to be made that due to the limit of angels, they just may not be capable. That was one of the things that The Exorcist on, I think it was a Sean Ryan show, was he gave this number of angels. It's like in the trillions. It's just like, how do you even know that? Where are you getting this information from? Anyway, let's continue listening.
The idea that God is hidden to protect us and our free will is more of an excuse for the absence of God. At some point, a hidden God and a non-existent God look exactly the same. I didn't choose to stop believing in God. This is one of the things I wish Christians really understood better. You know, people will say in the comments, "Hey Todd, you were warned," or "When you stand before God on Judgment Day, you'll know the truth," as if I'm standing here with this full belief in God and just refusing to submit to Him. That's just not the case. That's not what happened. I was a Christian for most of my life. I preached the gospel for more than 20 years. I taught people how to be saved. I prayed and studied the word daily and defended Christianity. I built my entire life around the word of God, and I believed I had an intimate relationship with the Christian God. And then, over time, I simply became unconvinced. That wasn't a choice in the way I choose a shirt to put on each day.
This is what happens when you begin to criticize the truth. Truth withstands scrutiny and criticism. If the things that you believe begin to crumble under criticism, it probably means they weren't true. One of the things I love about this channel is we've discovered things here that answer so many of the questions that people have. And all it does for me is it reinforces my belief in the Creator. I just have a better understanding of Him. This is why this series is called The Beginning of Knowledge, is because this is the beginning of truly understanding who the Creator is, not the lies. And the goal is to provide the receipts, to provide the evidence, not stupid answers like it's a mystery or you got to take it on faith. I've never accepted those as answers. Taking it on faith? No, give me a reason. Give me a reason to believe what you're saying. Give me a logical series of events that leads to that conclusion. This is how this is why I believe what I believe about the virgin birth. I do believe that the virgin birth was possible, but it's based on the fact that God gave us the information in Genesis that Adam was formed from the dust of the ground and Eve was formed from his side. So you could almost say that she was, that was a virgin birth of a sort, because she didn't have a physical, or he didn't have a physical father. Adam didn't have a physical father, and Eve was formed from Adam's side. So you could take that logic and apply it to Mary, and because Genesis 3:15 said the seed of the woman would bruise the head of the serpent. Well, you take that same logic from Adam and Eve and you apply it to Mary and go, it's entirely reasonable that God could have, formed the seed from Mary's side in order to produce the Messiah, resulting in a virgin birth. And there's good reason for that. If there's something, and this is one of the things that people struggle with is, and even the Jews, there's no sin that can't be cleansed by sacrifice. That's why we were given sacrifice, to cleanse. Well, what if it was in the blood? What if it is something about the blood that is passed down from father to son, from parent to child? Then there's a reason for Jesus to be born from a virgin, to not inherit whatever that problem was. And I think a convenient answer is some kind of corruption or mutation. And this is what leads me to this idea that, well, there are records about angels coming down and taking the daughters of Adam and producing children with them, known as the Nephilim. Okay, so right there in Scripture, we have documented that a new genetic bloodline was introduced into Adam and Eve's bloodline. There has to be something there with that leads to why Jesus had to be born without inheriting Adam's bloodline. Right? I mean, like, I don't have the full answer, but I have the puzzle pieces that give me enough to go, okay, well, that makes sense. Jesus had to be born from a virgin, and here's some of the pieces that help support that. That's a much better answer, in my opinion, than most other things that we've heard. Anyway, I'll stop talking. This is taking way too long. We still have the torment report to go through, and it's a long one.
Is a choice. I didn't wake up one morning and decide, hey, I think I'll stop believing in God today. I just reached a point over years of questioning where the reasons I had for believing no longer convinced me that the Christian God was real.
Yeah.
And you know that's true, Christian, because you can't force yourself to believe things either. You can't choose to believe in Islam just because a Muslim warns you about Muslim judgment.
This point here that he's about to make is such a great point. This whole fear motivation. Exactly. Don't believe something because of fear.
You know, you can't choose to believe in Mormonism just because a Mormon comes to your door and tells you that you've been warned. You know, you can't choose to believe in a Greek God or a Hindu God or any other God claims just because someone threatens consequences. Belief doesn't work that way, and you inherently know that. If you're a Christian, you can choose to study. You can
see some of you. I honestly, I don't think many of you here in the channel, but some people who are going to watch this video, if they make it this far, are looking at him and listening to him and criticizing him as falling away from the faith. I see him as somebody who is waking up and beginning to he wants true answers that he can truly believe in, not answers that have been fed to him that are unsubstantiated and unsupported. You know, he said that. So he said that, you know, teaching things that there's no evidence for. He did that for years. And unfortunately, that is the business model for a lot of Christian churches, is they literally have pre-approved doctrine. And that's almost what makes a religion, is a codified doctrine that is taught to a particular group of people. And everybody seems to think they're right. And for some reason, it causes everybody to be divided. Well, not everybody. It causes a lot of people to be divided. I would argue that Christians are better than religious death cults. However, that is fairly new, because Catholicism is attributed to many, many, many deaths of Christians. And I think that's where you end up with a serious problem, is religions that result in death cults. That's a problem.
You can choose to listen, you can choose to stay open, you can choose to be honest about your beliefs, but you can't choose to believe. You can't choose to be convinced. And that's where I am. I'm not refusing God, the God that...
Okay, just back to the context, because he's saying you can't choose to be convinced, and I believe the context is by fear. You can't choose to be convinced because of the consequences.
You can choose to be honest about your beliefs, but you can't choose to believe. You can't choose to be convinced. And that's where I am. I'm not refusing God, the God that I know is real.
See?
I'm not angry at a God I secretly believe in. I'm not choosing rebellion over truth. I'm simply not convinced Christianity is true anymore. That's it. Look, and if God exists, He knows that better than anyone. So once I understood how strongly geography and culture shape religious belief and how hidden God remains, and that I couldn't simply choose to believe, I had to go back and examine the entire foundation Christianity depends on, which is the Bible. So some of my questions were around the idea, if the Bible is a clear revelation from God to humanity, I'd really expect it to look and actually function differently from an ordinary human book. But the more closely I examined the Bible, it looked exactly like what we would expect if humans actually wrote it. If God wrote a book, I would expect it to sound more like God wrote it. And I don't...
This is actually a good point. And this was something that actually tripped me up too, because the foundation of my knowledge was the assumption that the Bible as we had it was the revealed word and will of God, and that it was perfect. when you start with a foundation like that, it hides from you the fact that actually the scripture, according to 2 Peter, what is it, 2 Peter 1:20 and 21, knowing this first, that no prophecy of the scriptures of any private interpretation, for the prophecy came not in old time by the will of man, but holy men of God spake as they were moved by the Holy Spirit. That's what the scripture is it is works from holy men as they spoke, as they were moved by the Holy Spirit. It's inspiration. So it's still a work and product of man and subject to contradiction and ambiguity, especially since it's such an old collection of works. And that's the other thing to remember, is it's a collection of works from many different authors. In your search for the truth, you have to take those things into consideration. You have to realize, the thing that what is written may or may not be what was originally inspired. It could have changed over the course of time, and there's definitely evidence of some of those things. There's a fallacy going around that they're finding copies of the Bible, like in the Dead Sea Scrolls, that are perfect copies to what we have today. As I understand that only applies to one book, Isaiah. The book of Isaiah, they found a copy in the Dead Sea Scrolls that is virtually identical to some of our later transcripts. However, they have found many other books that have many different variations that are not as publicly known. So that is the foundation. Again, you need to have this foundational belief that truth withstands criticism. So our goal is to understand God. Our goal is to understand life. Our goal is to understand why things happen, why things are the way they are, and what we can do to live life and have it more abundantly. So there's a level of wisdom in realizing truth and reality, such as simply casting out a demon in the name of Jesus Christ may not stop somebody from pulling a trigger, because you may be under the impression that all bad things happen as a result of spiritual possession. Well, what was Cain's excuse? According to the timeline that we worked on with the Nephilim and evil spirits weren't around until 400 years after Cain and Abel. So that puts the responsibility of him pulling the trigger, so to speak, to murder his brother on him. There was no spirit to cast out. So if Cain could murder somebody, no amount of casting out a demon is going to stop him. What does that tell you? That some people do bad things. And you would do well to be mindful of that. And, if you can, get yourself strong so that you can defend against those kind of things. Take martial arts. It's amazing for you. Half the people in my class are over 80 years old. Just in case some of you are wondering if you should. Granted, they're also in amazing health, so take your health into consideration. Some of the classes I take are extremely aggressive. I'm not saying I'm in the best shape right now, but I've been an athlete most of my life. I used to run, 7 miles every single day up until just a couple of years ago. So your mileage may vary. But my point being is, challenge the things that you believe to be true and really try to get to understanding truth. And also, one of the reasons that we carry weapons in my family is a polite society is an armed society is a polite society. They have an effect on your mentality. When you realize you have the power of life and death in your hands, it changes the way you approach situations. And it also puts you in a position to, if somebody has decided that they have the right to take your life, you can defend yourself. And that is allowed. God obviously allows us to do that. Anyway, again, I'm rambling.
honestly mean that as a cheap shot. I used to believe the Bible came from God, and I preached it that way. I built my life
I
around it.
do believe the Bible came from God, but again, it was inspired in the lives of his prophets, and it was written down, and it is definitely subject to issues, and that needs to be considered when you're studying it.
I preach that others should trust it and obey it and build their eternity and lives around it. But if this book really comes from an all-knowing, perfectly good, all-loving God, why does it sound exactly like the ancient world that it came from? I mean, really, why does it contain law?
That's also a really good point, is just because something was written long ago doesn't make it any more true than knowledge that we may have today. So I do believe that we could probably add to or write truth down. So God still inspires people. I do believe that things that are written that don't contradict, I mean, even the songs, like this is one of the reasons why I'm using AI to generate songs, is because I want songs that I can listen to that aren't going to irritate me because they're perpetrating, religious beliefs that I've debunked in my own personal life. I want stuff that is, more aligned with what I've validated and can prove, because it encourages me to love God, to know that our God is a mighty God. So yeah, so this is a point I've been actually wanting to talk about for a while, is the Bible has credibility because of age, but it doesn't mean that it's perfect. You should still scrutinize and challenge and criticize and try to get to the best understanding of what was originally written.
Laws condoning, endorsing slavery instead of just saying slavery's wrong. Just don't do it. God has no problem saying murder is wrong and lying is wrong and stealing is wrong. Why does it treat women in ways most of us, I would like to say all of us, would never defend today? Why does it prescribe death for breaking the Sabbath?
I'm going to probably come back to these. We'll probably start with these questions. I don't know. The next video is just him, one question after another, and we're going to start addressing each one of those questions. So let's start with slavery here, just real quick. We'll do these in more detail later. One of the problems with old texts is understanding Orientalisms, and just because you have an enlightened knowledge about something doesn't mean that previous generations had that same enlightened understanding. Believe it or not, we still actually have the same concept of slavery that he's referring to. But there are, in the same way that there's different types of religions, there's different ways that people have been enslaved. The employee-employer relationship is a form of slavery because you are working to get something from somebody. You're just not under chain and collar. You're not restricted in the same ways that they were. So got to be careful with that, because and this is part of getting to the truth of what's written, is understanding the culture, understanding Orientalisms, understanding why things were the way they were, stuff like that.
And lying is wrong and stealing is wrong. Why does it treat women in ways most of us, I would like to say all of us, would never defend today? Why does it prescribe death for breaking the Sabbath? Why does it contain so much violence that later on Christians...
Some of that stuff I see as very pharisaical, and this is what Jesus came to confront. This is why Jesus is the image of God, because he reflected the true nature of God in the way that he treated people, and he came to confront these things that he has a problem with.
have to explain away and soften and contextualize and defend. And look,
it's entirely possible that we may have evidence of things that are horrific that may just be really, really early corruptions. This is why I think Jesus is so important. And, this whole thing of what would Jesus do is really actually quite enlightening, because if he represents the will of God on earth, looking at how he treated people and how he submitted so much to the point that he allowed himself to be killed like a lamb, led to the slaughter, rather than calling 72 legions of angels in order to kill. That should get your attention for how we should understand these things that are written. And again, I point to there's evidence that Jesus truly is the Messiah in the things that are happening today. If you're new to the channel, you're just going to have to take my word for it. If you've been here for a while, you know what I'm talking about.
I understand the Christian answer. I gave the Christian answer from the pulpit for 2 decades. I knew how to talk about context and progressive revelation and ancient culture and, God meeting people where they were. I knew all the ways to make the Bible sound like it made sense. But that answer only worked because I started with a conclusion that the Bible was perfect and couldn't be wrong.
Yeah.
Because if
that is a big problem to getting to the truth, is when you think something is perfect and beyond question, you're afraid. And especially if you're under the yoke of, or the bondage of fear of death or hell, that's going to stop you from. And this is why this is what I believe makes a cult, is if you're afraid to question the doctrine or the leaders, you're probably in a cult. Because somebody is using fear to control you.
ordinary people can take a look at this Bible and just look at parts of it and immediately say that shouldn't be in there, then we should all ask why a perfect God put it in there in the first place. For years, my job was to defend the Bible. Now I have to be honest about what I see. The book looks deeply and unmistakably human. There isn't one Christianity. There are thousands of Christianities.
This is a really good point.
The Baptists think they have the correct version. The Catholics think they do. The Calvinists think they do. The Pentecostals are certain that they do. The progressive Christians, they think so. And they all point to the same Bible. So I decided to do a simple thought experiment. Let's just take 8 major Christian doctrines and use extremely conservative numbers for how many major views exist in each one. So baptism, 2 views. Communion, 3 views. Salvation, 2. Can salvation be lost? 2 views. Predestination and free will? 3 views. Hell? 3. End times? 3. Biblical inspiration? 3 views. Now, multiply those together. Don't add, multiply. The result is 1,944 possible combinations of Christian belief. And remember,
I would argue that is way, way lower than the actual number, considering there are, 60,000 different denominations. What makes a denomination is somebody they felt that they needed to differentiate their belief from somebody else.
Intentionally grouped many views together and ignored dozens of other doctrines that Christians still disagree on, like creation, women in ministry, spiritual gifts, church authority, LGBTQ inclusion, atonement theories, divorce and remarriage, and many others. Once you add just a handful of those, the possible combinations explode into the millions. So when someone tells you that's not true Christianity, I hear that all the time. What they usually mean is that's not my Christianity. The question isn't whether Christians interpret the Bible differently.
And this is one of the reasons why I believe that God probably chose. I've been using the term candidate 2 witnesses. So I believe, if you're new here, I believe Donald Trump and Elon Musk are the 2 witnesses. I'm a little undetermined. Anyway, I believe Donald Trump and Elon Musk are 2 very good candidates for the 2 witnesses. A lot of people have problems with that because they're not religious enough, or they don't preach their particular religion. They don't fit in the box that they expect. I think that is probably intentional. It would not surprise me if the point of these end times is not to destroy religions. If it's not to put your belief to the test and wake you up in the same way that Dr. Todd has been woken up right here. Because God is not in those religions. God is not a God of confusion. God is not the God of Babylon. We've been living in confusion. We've been in Babylon, and it's time for us to come out of that confusion.
Differently. They all clearly do. The question is why a supposedly clear message from a perfect God produces thousands of denominations, thousands of interpretations, and nearly 2,000 possible combinations from just 8 major doctrines alone. And listen, if you're deconstructing because you couldn't make all of that make sense, you are not the problem. You were handed a Bible that Christians have never agreed how to read, then told the message was clear. You didn't fail to understand Christianity. Christianity failed to ever speak with one clear voice. The evangelical gospel has an Adam and Eve problem. Original sin only works if Adam and Eve were real historical people. And I don't think they were. Because if Adam and Eve weren't...
So there is some validity to this because of the poetic nature of Genesis. And I've talked about this a little bit. Adam and Eve could be figurative. They could be figures of speech that represent mankind. That they could be describing how it originally happened. Adam and Eve could have been. But here's the thing is a lot of people are under the impression that the earth is only 6,000 years old. Something that we've been learning, especially in the last couple of years, is that there are 12,000-year cycles with 6,000-year transitions. In other words, it's entirely possible that the universe could be millions and billions of years old. I think the last count was 13 billion years old or something like that. But it's entirely possible that 13 billion years ago was when God created Adam and Eve. And we could be living in a cycle that resets every 6,000 years. That there is some evidence to support that. So it could be that Adam and Eve figuratively represent mankind and the consequences that we're still dealing with for why we die. So I understand what he's saying, to where there's we don't really have concrete evidence that Adam and Eve existed other than the fact that male and female exist today. We'll leave it there.
Real people, then there was no historical fall of man. And if there was no historical fall of man, then one of the central pieces...
Yeah, and this goes to, the teaching of the Roman Catholic Church. When you challenge the traditional understanding of the fall of man, it's actually not even biblical. This is something that we've been tackling a lot lately in just the last couple of months. What really happened in the garden? Who is Satan? Who is the serpent? What's actually written is, when you combine the book of Enoch, Esdras, and the apocryphal books with what's actually written, it paints a different picture. The picture, the too long didn't read version of the picture, is there are angels called watchers that when God created Adam and Eve, whenever he made them, they were attracted to the daughters of man, and they chose to lead their given role, their given offices, 200 of them, bound themselves together by mutual imprecation, meaning they all agreed to suffer the consequences together, and they knew there were consequences. And they came down and took wives from among the daughters of Adam and produced children. That's what we can prove from what's written. So that is different in a lot of ways from Adam and Eve were put in a garden, they ate an apple, sin, the spirit died within them, and then sin was born. You know what I mean? So there's what you can prove, and then what people traditionally teach. Also, that goes hand in hand with, a third of the angel. There's nothing in the scripture or apocrypha that supports any kind of rebellion against God, or, Lucifer taking a third of the angels. What's actually written and what's supported is 200 angels bound themselves together, came down, made children. The children resulted in the Nephilim, and those 200 angels are in chains in the earth somewhere right now. But that's a better explanation for why, we're born dead in trespasses and sin, is if the genetics got messed up, that gives a good reason for why Jesus needed to be born of a virgin. He needed to not inherit that genetic corruption. That also explains why there's cancer and why we don't live as long as they lived, in Genesis.
Of evangelical Christianity just collapses. Now, I know people in the Christian community will say, hey, people still sin. And of course, people do harmful, selfish, cruel things. And
Yeah, people, there's a woeful misunderstanding of sin too. Everybody, especially religious people, pretty much everything that they disagree with is a sin. That's another funny thing. Yeah.
that's not the point. The point is original sin. The point is the idea that humanity inherited guilt and corruption, death, and a broken relationship with God because the first human beings, Adam and Eve, just disobeyed God in a real garden.
The reality is God probably warned them, don't produce children with the angels, or in that you'll introduce death into the bloodline, because he didn't want those two bloodlines to mix.
At least that's the story. But if Adam and Eve aren't historical people, then there wasn't a single, first couple.
I mean, just logic dictates that there must have been a man, the very first man and woman, unless, of course, I guess there is the Anunnaki, way of describing it, to where aliens came down and produced that, our bodies, which are robots, which reproduce. I mean, I guess there is that. I have issues with the Emerald tablets and the Anunnaki story. There's way less evidence to support that than there is what's written in the scripture. The thing that the Bible has going for it is its age.
People who brought sin into the world.
And there's a lot of things that are true, that are verifiable. But again, there's also a lot of stories we tell about the Bible which aren't true.
There was no moment when human nature fell. There was no curse that suddenly entered creation because two people just ate from a tree. And that creates a massive problem for the version of evangelical Christianity I preached for more than 20 years.
Yeah, I would love to sit down with him and go through the book of Enoch. It might enlighten him to start challenging these doctrines that he used to teach.
Because the story that I preached was simple. God created the world and it was good. Adam and Eve sinned, humanity fell, sin entered the world, we inherited guilt and separation from God from Adam and Eve. And then Jesus came as a solution for Adam's fall. That was it. But if Adam isn't historical, and I don't think he is, then what exactly did Jesus come to undo? Did he come to undo a metaphor? Did he come to undo a symbol, an ancient origin story? Look, I know there are versions of Christianity and other theories of atonement and why Jesus came.
So this is where we get into the spiritual also, is there has to be a spiritual side of life, because we don't know what causes consciousness. We can't reproduce it. It has to be something spiritual. And Jesus, the best that we've been able to get to understanding is that he fixed what Adam and Eve broke in the very beginning. And I think we have some good answers. I don't know if they're complete answers. There's still room for discovery, because there are some issues with my theories, definitely. Me and Wayne go back and forth on, who's Cain's father all the time. But I do believe that there is sufficient evidence to form an opinion on why I think the mixing the blood is a really good explanation. Like if Adam and Eve was one bloodline and God warned Adam and Eve not to mix their bloodline with another entity because it would result in messing up consciousness or spirit or something like that it would need to be fixed later on. I do believe that that's sufficient for me to understand and believe in Jesus. Because you got to get to the point to where you at least are willing to consider that Jesus might be the promised seed, the one who's going to fix everything, because then we can take advantage of what's happening right now, where we're watching prophecy be fulfilled, which is basically proving that Jesus is who he said he was, the Messiah, the Son of God, born of a virgin. showed us how to live God's will. He was the image of God's will. When you look at him, if you want to know if your behavior is right, look at what he did.
Other than what I give or what I used to talk about for the reason Jesus came. And that's fine. But evangelical Christianity, especially the version built around substitutionary atonement, this isn't a small issue. No historical Adam means no historical fall. No historical fall means no inherited guilt. And no inherited guilt means no original sin. And if your gospel depends on Jesus dying to fix what Adam broke, then the entire structure falls. Once the Bible no longer looked like a clear and reliable revelation from God, the doctrines built on it actually became harder for me to defend. And that was especially true when it began confronting what Christianity says about the character of God. I couldn't any longer avoid the suffering that has nothing to do with human free will. I couldn't any longer reconcile eternal hell with a God described as perfectly loving. Unnecessary suffering is one of the reasons I no longer believe in the Christian God. Every worldview has to account for suffering in some way, and I get that. Christians often explain much of it through free will. In other words, human beings harm each other. We have the free will to do that, so war, abuse, and cruelty, those all flow from human choices, and that explains why those things happen. But that's not the suffering that continued to press on me. It's leukemia in a 4-year-old. That's not the...
This is why I believe it's important to understand the mixed bloodlines. Because those bloodlines, God warned in the beginning, don't take from that family tree. Don't mix your trees. Don't mix your bloodline with these other bloodlines, because that also explains how we're born dead in trespasses and sin. If we were born with a perfect bloodline that had the potential to be immortal, and corruption was introduced into that took away that immortality, that definitely explains how you can be born dead in trespasses and sin. And I don't think these bodies will ever be fixed. This is what Jesus came to fix, is these bodies are permanently broken, but our consciousness and who we are isn't. That can be put into another body. That is being born again, is very likely the whole point of what we're looking for right now, to where Christ comes back. Those who are alive and remain, our body, we shed these bodies and we get new bodies. Those who are dead in Christ waiting for his return will be raised up again. Their consciousness will be put into another body. It's the best I got for that right now, given our time.
Result of someone's moral decision. Genetic disorders aren't chosen. Earthquakes aren't acts of rebellion by humans. Parasites that blind children aren't caused by human freedom. The predator-prey reality of nature and the extinction of most species on the planet happened long before humans ever showed up. Look, Christian theology says God is all-powerful, he's all-knowing, he's all-loving. And if that's true, then suffering that serves no clear purpose raises a lot of questions for me.
Yeah, again, it goes back to the mixed bloodline. I think I've sufficiently answered that. No sense in keep kicking that one.
And I'm not asking why suffering exists at all. I'm asking why there's so much suffering that appears, just unnecessary or gratuitous. Suffering that doesn't build character, it doesn't arise from moral choices, and doesn't seem required for any greater good. For years, I said that God had reasons beyond our understanding. I would say his ways are not our ways. His thoughts are higher than ours. I said those things and accepted them for a really long time. But eventually I had to admit that when I placed the attributes of God next to the world as it actually is, they just didn't fit together. I could keep affirming both, but I couldn't make them fit together. And that's why I no longer believe. One of the foundational bricks to fall that caused the math of my faith to kind of stop mathing, I guess you'd call it. It was the realization that an all-loving God and the concept of hell literally cannot exist in the same reality. It just can't. Look, I know the traditional counter-argument. I preached it.
Again, a lot of what's taught about hell is not in the Bible. It's Roman Catholic teaching and other religions that have formed off of that belief. Do a study of hell. A lot of it, yeah, it's not in there. It's so much like so many other things that we've discovered. Yeah.
You know, people will say, well, God is all-knowing, so he knew I'd sin, for example, and because He's all loving. He sent Jesus to die and provide a way out of sin and out of hell. And they'll say he used his power, being all powerful, to defeat death through Jesus. And so we wouldn't have to go to hell. But that actually, from my perspective, now makes the problem worse. It ignores the fact that God is the actual architect of the entire system. Look, if God's all powerful and all knowing, he's the one who decided that the consequences for decades of sin, just a few decades of our lives, no matter how many sins we have and human mistakes, the consequence of that should be eternal conscious torture. He didn't
Which, again, not supported by the scripture. That is a fake teaching.
just find hell out there one day existing and then try to save us from it because he's loving. He's the one that created hell as the
You know, there's actually some interesting evidence that we are living in hell. That have you guys heard this? That actually Earth right now, that our lives is actual hell, and that Jesus coming and taking us out of here with the return is us escaping hell. Have you guys heard that? That's a good one.
the default destination because of our sin nature. I mean, he could have chosen any other consequence. Literally, he could have chosen rehabilitation or like a timeout or even just non-existence, annihilation. That would have been better than hell. But instead, he designed a system of never-ending torture and then asked for praise from us because supposedly he provided a loophole.
Yeah, the never-ending torture, I believe, is a teaching from cults used to scare you into accepting whatever it is they're shoving down your throat.
To escape the very nightmare that he built in the first place. That's not a rescue mission. It's like a hostage situation. Realizing that hell was a tool of control for me rather than kind of a logical necessity was one of the big bricks to fall in my deconstruction. So none of these questions by themselves ended my faith. Deconstruction wasn't one dramatic moment for me. It was an accumulation of problems that I could no longer answer honestly over a decade. Look, I spent more than 20 years preaching Christianity and defending these beliefs with passion. But eventually, continuing to call Christianity true would have required me to ignore what I could plainly see and then pretend I still believed, and I just couldn't do that. You know, these are the 8 questions that I asked and the reasons I left Christianity. So what I want to do is ask you in the comments, what caused you to leave? And if you're still a Christian, are any of these 8 reasons things you have questions about too?
So again, I believe this is the beginning of knowledge. If
God is real and I ever stand before him, these are some of the questions that I'd have.
Again, I believe that this is the beginning of knowledge when you start to come out of Babylon and realize you were lied to. A lot of what he was describing are the lies that he believed and perpetrated. And unfortunately, there's probably large numbers of people who are repeating what he taught during his decades as a megachurch pastor. That hopefully they will come out of Babylon, come out of confusion. I would hope that maybe we can reach him and help him realize that from listening to him, what I've heard from him so far is I do believe that he believes in God, just because I don't think he clearly communicated where he is when he calls himself an agnostic atheist, because an atheist means without God, I believe. Agnostic is more, he doesn't subscribe to a particular doctrine, as I understand it, which I think is probably more correct for his position. He has realized that he has lived in confusion and is now seeking truth. And I think that once he starts to get real answers, I think that he'll be pivotal for the people he taught. Hopefully he'll be able to reach them. Hopefully this will be a compounding. Hopefully this can go viral. You know what I mean? Like this is the objective in these end times is I believe that God, through his son, the Lamb, is challenging people's beliefs, and hopefully they're realizing the lies that they were taught and are waking up from that, because that is where the beginning of knowledge is. So let's look at some of these things. So 2 Corinthians tells us, but even if our gospel is veiled, It is veiled to those who are perishing, whose minds the God of this age has blinded, who do not believe, lest the light of the gospel of the glory of Christ, who is the image of God, should shine on them. The God of this age who God of this age works actively to keep people from seeing the truth about God and his Messiah. Blindness is not merely intellectual, it is spiritual. I would say that there's a lot of intellectual aspects to it. So the God of this age, meaning what we traditionally call Lucifer or Satan, is, you could almost put in there religion. That is, religion is kind of a god in that it controls people. And it actively works to keep people from seeing the truth. Each particular denomination would have you believe their version of truth and want you separated from other people's versions of truth. Ephesians, having their understanding darkened, being alienated from the life of God because of the ignorance that is in them, because of the blindness of their heart. Hosea says, my people are destroyed for lack of knowledge. Because you have rejected knowledge, I also will reject you from being priests for me. This is why it's important to be dead honest. Like, you need to be honest when somebody presents compelling evidence against something that you may believe. You should be honest to acknowledge the evidence. A lot of people, this is why I don't debate anymore, is it's very hard to find somebody who wants to debate with a mind to change their position. Most people debate in order to prove their position. I think the right way is for iron to sharpen iron, to where if somebody prevents a compelling argument, you should concede. I would love to have those kind of debates, because I know there's things I'm not right about, and I want somebody to present compelling arguments. The problem is a lot of those who are blind, when you present compelling arguments and compelling evidence, they resort to verbal attacks, abuse, avoiding the answer, avoiding dealing with the answer. They just don't know how to deal with it. So many people can't go, you might be right about that, or that makes sense. So this is I believe, part of this mystery Babylon, and this is why we started with this video today. The mother of harlots and the abominations of the earth. Tree of knowledge of good and evil, you would think it would involve knowledge of good and evil. There's something there could be something to that. Religion sets itself as knowledge of good and evil, right? Religion is what is the tool that we use to define God. And there's a lot of definitions. So this is the harlot. She sits on a scarlet beast full of names of blasphemy. Names of blasphemy are names that are not true. So each one of those religions sets a boundary that's a blasphemous name, a system of political and religious power. Influence, the kings of the earth committed fornication with her. Now that I think about it, politics is a form of cultism. Governments and politics use various systems to control people. We're all slaves, whether you like it or not. Like the slavery in the Old Testament is just a different implementation of the slavery we're in today. The kings of the earth committed fornication with her. A lot of people use religion to get what they want. Narcissists love religion. And the inhabitants of the earth were made drunk with the wine of her fornication. People feel powerful when they can control you. She is drunk with the blood of the saints and with the blood of the martyrs of Jesus. See, Jesus stands as the example. When in doubt for how to behave and how to treat people, did he separate people by their religion? Not really. He visited the woman at the well who was from the Samaritan woman, right? The culture that was normally eschewed, normally avoided, normally thought to be like dogs. He welcomed her. And he gave us an idea of what things are going to be like when he returns. He's going to separate the sheep from the goats, the sheep on the right hand, the goats on the left hand. The sheep, their defining characteristic is the way they treat people. They treat the least of their brethren like they would Jesus. The goats, on the other hand, don't. Narcissist versus empathy is a really good way of understanding that. The narcissists are the goats. The sheep are empathy, the empaths, so to speak. So we're going to be looking at a lot of this week. Common deceptions the harlot system spread. God is whatever you want him to be. That is a destructive fantasy. And this is why when this fails, people tend to leave God, is because they have an idea of who and what he is. And when it fails them, they blame God. But that is a product of the harlot system. Another one, all paths lead to God. Truth is diluted so that no exclusive claims remain. Knowledge of God is optional. Religion becomes ceremony, emotion, or power, not a relationship and obedience. Messiah is redefined. Jesus is reduced to a teacher, a symbol, and one option among many. He really stands as the example. He stands as the image of God. If you want to know how to live right, you look at his Messiah. And he's the one who earned the right to reign as King of Kings and Lord of Lords. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge. This is going to be the verse for the week, Proverbs 1:7. But fools despise wisdom and instruction. True knowledge does not begin with human philosophy, scientific consensus, or religious tradition alone. It begins when one person turns from lies of the age and bows in reverent awe before the living God. It's really the recognition of God as the creator of the heavens and earth, and recognizing the creation and working to understand him that you begin to actually gain knowledge. These are important. Philosophy, scientific consensus, even tradition is important. But again, truth withstands scrutiny. So we all have a responsibility to scrutinize the things that we believe. Are they really true? Proverbs 9:10, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom, and the knowledge of the Holy One is understanding. The call of Scripture is clear, and I heard another voice from heaven saying, "Come out of her, my people, lest you share in her sins, and lest you receive of her plagues." Oops, let's go back there. So this is the end result that we want. We want people to have answers that they can stand behind and truly believe and understand why things are the way they are and what to expect. Waking up means recognizing the deception of the harlot system, turning from lies about who God is, seeking the knowledge of the Holy One in reverence, and walking in the light that the gospel reveals. So my hope is to answer people like Todd who have realized they were lied to give him enough answers to explain his doubts so that he can confidently know his God, know who the creator of the heavens and the earth is. Knowledge begins here. Acknowledge the blindness. You got to realize that you're an idiot. I say that about myself all the time. I'm an idiot. I get things wrong. The thing that I like to think separates me is I acknowledge my failures, and I constantly iterate until I figure out better answers, better solutions. Fear of the Lord. Turn in reverent awe to God who reveals himself in Scripture. Come out of her. Separate from the lies of the harlot, of the spirit of this age. Grow in knowledge. Pursue the knowledge of the Holy One. This is understanding. So this is what we're going to do for the week, is study this. Hopefully we'll come out with some clear answers. So the next video that we're going to watch is 109 questions that he has. And we're probably going to tackle them in sections. I don't know if we'll get it. Well, my goal is to get all of them answered by the end of the week, or to pursue the answer. I'm not claiming that I know the answer to all 109 of his questions, but I'd like to think that I can answer a quarter to half of them pretty sufficiently, having been on this journey myself. I wholeheartedly believe in God, just in case anybody is wondering. I don't think any of you guys wonder about my belief in God, but I can totally empathize with Dr. Todd. I'm excited for his future because I see him coming out of Babylon, coming out of the confusion, realizing that religion is not the answer. So I think we should probably, since it's so late, I don't know if we actually have time for the Daily Torment Report. Why don't we just go do 15 minutes on their posts to see if there's anything that kind of stands out, and then we'll call it a night at 2 hours. So let us go over here, see what Trump has said. Oh, thank you. Let's see. So this is Dago. Thank you to the highly respected Mohammed, King of Morocco. Such a great honor. I look forward to the entire length of this highway. Someday, hopefully soon, President Trump. Okay. More stuff he's building. Breaking news. The failing New York Times. Okay, he's bashing on New York Times. Let's see. Secretary Kennedy are proud to celebrate 1 year of making health tech great again. What started with 60 organizations has grown into a movement of more than 800 organizations. You know, it's one of the cool things about Donald Trump is he's very good at getting to the truth of the matter. And I think that is part of one of the things that causes Trump derangement syndrome is, in a lot of ways, the way that people are fooled by religion, they're fooled by the lies that are told about Donald Trump. That's part of this. It would not surprise me if this is not part of the tests that are happening to the whole world right now. Camera's a little off center there. That's all Donald Trump is doing is this guy's at the end of his age, you know. He understands he's not going to live forever, and he does not have to be doing what it is that he's doing. But for the love of God and for the love of country, he is doing everything he can to get through the lies and the corruption and to set the country that he loves on a better path than it's been on. And I think that's probably why he's one of God's two witnesses is that is the testimony of what we should do ourselves, be like him. Moving trees. Let's see. My husband and I are honored and thrilled to participate in okay, this is about the investing. Let's see. I know normally we would spend 2 hours actually going through his posts. We'll see if there's anything that really stands out. Trump card. He is such a troll. It's almost like God is making it so blatantly obvious at the last Trump. I laugh when I see that now at the last Trump. Yeah. Breaking news. More about the failing New York Times. The most electrifying, elevating fireworks display in American history. Okay. Don't really care about that. Greatest fireworks ever. Very cool. Let's see. Trump to address what it means to be an American. How long is that? 23 seconds.
Trace, my theory is that he saw Mondami's speech and said, you know what? I want to respond to that. Yeah. I want to respond to the rise of godless communism. And he called it the inhuman vision that they have for our world, as opposed to the American vision, which is about the flourishing of all humanity. I think that he did obviously dive into politics, but I think it was necessary. The country is at risk.
What a time to be alive. Amen.
What a time to be alive on our 250th, and thank God that President Trump is our president. This is a man who clearly loves this country. And this past week and past few weeks, starting with the UFC fight to the state fair to what happened at Mount Rushmore to the crescendo being last night, is something that makes me so proud to be an American in this very pivotal time in this world. And the crescendo, the coup de grace of it all, of course, is honoring the brave men from World War II that gave their lives and ran into a barrage of machine gunfire at the beaches of Normandy to rid the world of fascism. The international language is English and it's not German because of these brave men. And the fact that we are willing to honor these men that are over 100 years old on our 250th birthday is nothing short of remarkable. But it's not just them, it's the legacy that they left behind. It's because of these brave men that inspired people like me and my family and thousands of others to continue to serve this country bravely. And I also don't ever want to forget those that aren't alive anymore, those that paid the ultimate sacrifice for us to have a birthday just like this. Again, I thank God for President Trump being willing to not just celebrate them, but to celebrate American exceptionalism and also honoring those that are willing to give their lives, the less than 1% of this country that's willing to raise their hands to defend this country against all enemies, both foreign and domestic. And that warrior ethos is the reason why we live in the greatest country in the world and we get to celebrate this birthday. What a time.
I like him. Sorry. Almost brought a tear to my eye. Amen. Victor Davis Hanson says he knows he'll get in trouble for saying it, but many of the Democrats' most radical voices are first or second generation immigrants from failed nations. Yeah.
One of the things that's not being talked about, and I know I'll get criticized for this, but here it is. If you look at the candidates, Chevrolet, I should say, and AOC, and Rashida Tlaib, and Mondami, and to go on, but the kingpins,
right?
They're mostly first or second generation. First or second generation immigrants, and they come from areas that, to be candid and a little blunt, or failed, miserable places, such as Ghana or the Caribbean or many Latin American countries or Mexico. And I could very much expand that list to almost 50 to 60% of them are. So they come to this country either with their parents or their parents came and they were born. And then they put their feelers up, their little antennae, and they learn very early on that if you trash this country, the left will protect you and advance you. And no matter how much money you have, AOC's parents were pretty affluent. Ilhan Omar claims she was worth $30 million. Mondami's a multi-millionaire, settler colonialist from Uganda. And when you look at all of them, they have nothing but for contempt. This Chevrolet, whatever her name is, Chevrolet, she said she wipes her hands on the American flag and all of this stuff. Then don't come. Yeah. There's no reason you have to come. You came here because it was prosperous and safe, and there was not inbred tribal racism as in all these countries. Apparently, the people came with Ilhan Omar because they were on the side of the genocidal Saeed Berry. They keep saying genocide. The only person that really is a genocidal maniac was Saeed Berry, the head of the Somali government, of which a lot of these immigrants' parents were part of, including Ilhan Omar.
Very fair point. Yep. This can only happen in America. In 1930, an 18-year-old Scottish woman named Mary Ann MacLeod boarded a ship from New York With nothing but $50 in her pocket, she came from a rugged island with limited opportunity, registered as a domestic servant, and worked her way through the depths of the Great Depression. Years later, she married Frederick, the son of German immigrants. They raised 5 children in Queens, including a boy named Donald, who would grow up to reshape the New York skyline and eventually become president of the United States. That is the extraordinary promise of America. It's a story built on legal grit, hard work, and respect for the rule of law. Only in this country can the son of a legal immigrant maid rise up to the highest office in the land. And that's kind of the point. Like, we're not against immigrants. We're against the evil immigrants. We're against the ones who want to kill us. We're against the death cult. Yeah, we're not going to play that. Let's see. Okay, let's move on to Elon because we're running out of time. Here we go. See if there's any gems here. Best way to communicate with the world is directly in our own words, not through the reality distortion nightmare mirror that is the legacy mainstream press. I was deeply touched by the many messages you sent me following my open letter to Le Lamond. This is Bernard. I wanted to thank you and every one of you directly and personally here on X. Merci. Well, yeah. Okie doke. Actual footage of him traveling to work this morning. Yeah, not really. No result, no recess. John Thune should not allow the United States Senate to leave town until it passes the Save America Act or, far better still, terminates the filibuster, where Republicans can then quickly pass everything they ever dreamed of, including a full and deep-throated Save America Act, the budget, and the ever-looming debt ceiling disaster, 1929. The Democrats will do it in one day and can't believe how lucky they got with this Senate leadership. Remember, stupidity always brings losing and death. Damn! That's a repost of Rick Scott reposting from Donald Trump. That's pretty good. That's a really good line. Stupidity always brings losing and death. Fire from the mouth, baby. Just one more lockdown, my king. Yeah, this is so funny. Fauci's diary, December 11th. All of a sudden, Elon Musk has started to viciously attack me with tweets on Twitter. Not having symptoms is one of the symptoms. Oh, boy, I tell you what. In the last couple of weeks, X has been joined by Mark Zuckerberg, Jensen Huang, Denny's, Bernard Arnault. Welcome to the global town square. Yeah. Extremely important. Do you guys know that X also represents Christ? X is shorthand in what is it? Is it Greek? Where is it? Where did it come from? I can't remember the story. I'll have to dig it up for you guys. But X also represents Christ. Just thought that was interesting. I came across that when I was studying Ki Kachi stigma. Oh, it's Kashi, Greek. Yeah, it's the Greek letter X was used. It was during some battle where the commander would take crosses and put them on the battlefield sideways to make an X. That's how it then somehow it became representative of Christ. Anyway, squirrel. Fauci smelled it and he also dealt it. Exposed. Fauci's private diary reveals he estimated COVID-19's case fatality rate at 2 to 3% in February of 2020. Weeks later, he told Congress under oath that the virus had a higher mortality rate. Fauci's diary reveals he estimated COVID's rate far lower than what he told Congress. Interesting. This picture was taken on Mars yesterday. Elon, I will not forget about Mars. Let's see. I don't pay the protection money to the media. I don't suppose he does. Let's see. How long is this? Yeah, we don't need to read it. Come on. Give us another gem before we go. Here we go.
Yeah, I mean, I'm operating my meat puppet, you know. Yeah, we are actually. And by the way, it turns out, like, as we're designing Optimus, we sort of learn more and more about why humans are shaped the way they're shaped, and why we have 5 fingers and why your little finger is smaller than your index finger. Obviously why you have opposable thumbs, but also why, for example, the muscles, the major muscles that operate your hand are actually in your forearm, and your fingers are primarily operated like the muscles that actuate your fingers are located. The vast majority of your finger strength is actually coming from your forearm, and your fingers are being operated by tendons, little strings. And so the current version of the Optimus hand has the actuators in the hand and has only 11 degrees of freedom. So it doesn't have all the degrees of freedom of human hand, which has, depending on how you count it, roughly 25 degrees of freedom. Right. And it's also like not strong enough in certain ways because the actuators have to fit in the hand. So the next generation Optimus hand, which we have in prototype form, the actuators have moved to the forearm, just like a human, and they operate the fingers through cables, just like the human hand.
Yep.
And then the next generation hand has 22 degrees of freedom, which we think is enough to do almost anything that a human can do.
And presumably, I think it was written that X and Tesla may work together and, provide services, but my immediate thought went to, if you just provide a grok to the robot, then the robot has a personality and can process voice and video and images and all of that stuff.
Yeah, as we wrap here, I think, everybody talks about all the projects you're working on, but people don't know you have a great sense of humor.
That's not true.
Oh, you do. You do. People don't see it, but I would say I know for me, the funniest week of my life, or one of the funniest, was when you did SNL, and I got to tag along.
All right, that's pretty cool. They patterned Optimus by studying how the human body works. That's pretty cool. That reminded me, and I think this is probably a good note to leave off on Elon during this interview. Who does he admire most?
Who do you look up to the most?
The Creator.
What's your current position on God?
God is the Creator.
There you go.
You don't believe in God, though, do you?
Well, I believe this universe came from something.
I love the eye roll. I just told you I admire the Creator. There you go. It's probably a good place to end it. I'll go through. I've been kind of going through their posts the weekend. I didn't see anything that stood out to me that I feel like we have to cover. I think we covered it in the news. If there's anything that I missed that seems important, I'll bring it up again tomorrow. But I think we're probably good for calling it there. I don't like doing the 3-hour shows. I think they're kind of exhausting for everybody. I want to make it clear that I'm not trying to discourage anybody from God. I don't think any of you guys think that, but just in case anybody comes to this video and wonders why the heck I'm showing videos of somebody who has lost his faith in Christianity, the way that I perceive that video, and I think I made this clear by responding to the video, is that he's fed up with the lies. That for so many years he was caught up in the lies and the confusion that when it finally came to a head in his life, those lies failed him. And it not everybody gets to that point. There's a lot of people who are deceived by the lies. And I believe that is what the harlot who's riding the beasts has been doing for a long time, very long time. And our objective is to come out from that confusion. The ultimate objective is to love God and love your neighbor as yourself. If you find yourself not loving your neighbor as yourself, that should start to get your attention. You know, when you look at somebody, whether it's the grungy, scabbed up person on the sidewalk who's holding up a sign when you drive by to do your grocery shopping, and you look the other direction because it's uncomfortable, that should get your attention. Granted, a lot of those people have mental issues and are on drugs, but not all of them. Some of them don't want help. Some of them like being where they are. But that doesn't mean that you can't that you can't honor them. At least say hi if you have the opportunity. Hi, who are you? What is your name? Why are you here? Treat them like a human being. Treat them like they're Jesus. What led you to this place in your life? Start treating people like that. Learn to love your neighbor as yourself. If the most you can do is buy them a meal or give them a bottle of water or something to eat, that's amazing. That's progress. But we got to start challenging ourselves to stop looking at people as the enemy, even if the enemy wants to kill us. I do believe that there is wisdom in protecting yourself, recognizing trouble. I can't find myself recommending that you allow somebody to hurt you. By all means, I do believe you should defend yourself. You should be capable of defending yourself or escaping problems. But we should do better to love our neighbor as ourselves. And that means even people who don't agree with you. So the homeless is kind of an extreme example. Because just me personally, this is something I'm actually personally working on. At least twice a month, we go out of our way to go find somebody to feed. When I have the opportunity to talk to somebody I see who's homeless, I take an interest in their life to see if there's anything I can do. In a lot of cases, there's nothing I can do. But I at least make the effort to treat them, to see them as Jesus. And that's where I think that we can do better. I know I can. Maybe you guys are good at this already. Kevin Dahlgren got back to me, the guy who does Truth in the Streets, who goes to all the different cities, interviewing the homeless, talking to the homeless. I had asked him if there's any resources that he could point us to, or if he had any like how-to videos to be safe in doing that. His recommendation is you just have to have a big heart and a passion for people. Thanks. That's about where I'm at too. My family is working on having a bigger passion for people, a bigger heart for people, and it's been personally eye-opening. But also, I think that this is important at every level of our life. Is there a belief that you have that separates you from those who you should look at as as Christ? Are you when Christ returns, are you going to be separated? Are you going to find yourself gathered together with the sheep who had empathy for even the lowest of our brethren? Or are you going to be with the goats, the ones who didn't even realize they needed help because they were too busy taking care of their own needs? If you've ever had goats, that's what goats do. Goats only care about themselves. Unrestrained lust for their own pleasure. That's goats. They're narcissists. Goats are narcissists. Sheep are empathetic. So that's the objective. It's not to discourage you from believing in God, but to better refine our understanding of who God is so that we can have a better understanding of better expectations and so that we can actually treat people better. Because when you truly understand God and you truly have these answers for why things happen, I believe that it will wake you up so that you can treat people better. Not Christians, but religion would have you label people in order to separate them. You know, oh, that person's an alcoholic. That person's a drug addict. That person is abusive. You know, that person is divorced. That person is a pervert. That person, you know, whatever it is that you use to label people. I mean, human nature, you know, there's a degree of doing that just for our own safety, but there's a lot of that that takes place in religion, you know. There's a reason Jesus said, visit those who are in prison. You know, they're in prison for a reason. Doesn't mean you can't visit them. Doesn't mean you have to accept what got them there. Doesn't mean you have to condone it. Doesn't mean you have to participate. But recognize, find a way to love people. Stop finding ways to separate yourself from people. That's the ultimate goal, is undoing the work of the harlot, coming out of the confusion, getting to the truth of what's actually written. You know, that's a journey. I don't claim to have the full truth, but I think we've got some really good basis, really good starting points for understanding some of the more complicated things. Number one, where we are in the timeline. Time is short. Things are about to get really bad, and how we treat people is going to be important during this time. I fully expect that if we go into a great tribulation, to where there's disruption to the supply chain and disruption to our life as we know it, it's going to be a whole nother level of testing who you are. This might be why Mormons, why God made Mormons. They're prepared, and they have vast amounts of resources. Hopefully they have the heart to make sure everybody is taken care of. If the Great Tribulation starts and it really is as bad or worse than like COVID, to where there's lockdowns, disruptions in supplies, could be electricity problems. I fully expect there to be electrical issues. We're personally trying to make sure our solar system is capable of handling long power outages. It's going to be a time to test you. If you're afraid of everything around you, because there's going to be a time there's going to be potentially, I mean, think about it. Like, imagine just the supply chain is broken and the grocery shelves are empty. Remember what happened with the toilet paper. Imagine if it's like that, just like during COVID, but worse, no electricity, conflicts, enemies within the gates. People are not going to trust one another. They're going to hunker down in their own homes. Some would say that there's been predictive programming to get people to treat like a zombie apocalypse, where they shoot everybody that comes on their property. I don't know if I would do that. There's a lot of people who don't know how to feed themselves. It would be a good opportunity to learn how to forage if you're not prepared, or if you're not prepared to be able to help others. I think if everybody treats one another like their brother, and except for those who would intend harm, obviously be wise and hide yourself from the trouble. But if everybody, and this is one of the important things of recognizing how long it might last. It might only last 6 months. So if you could treat people well and realize that it might only last 6 months, then you might not be so afraid to give away a little bit of your food for somebody in need. Keep in mind that food is less important than water. Water is more valuable than food, because you can go a long time without food, depending on how much fat you have stored on your body. But I know we're prepared to, we got a lot of expired food that my wife would gladly give away to somebody who's starving or thinks they're starving. We've also stocked up on things like peanut butter and jelly that people can live off of for a long period of time, or canned foods. We have a ton of canned foods. I mean, we probably even have excess beans and rice and flour that we could divvy out and portion out to people. I'm not saying be stupid, but if there is a great tribulation and things get really bad here, I think that how we treat one another during this time will be very revealing. Obviously be wise, but at the same time, love your neighbor as yourself. It'll be interesting to see what the Mormon Church does, because they have got a lot of food prepped for the end times. A lot of food and money. I just learned the Mormon Church has $300 billion stashed away for the Great Tribulation. Who knew? They're prepared as if money is going to be valuable during the Great Tribulation. Maybe the intention is to prop up and support the economy. It's a good way to divvy out food. Like if you have access to resources, if you can maintain a level of you want to buy food, it's going to cost you. It's a good way to kind of keep the same system that was working going. Anyway, let's leave it at that. Thank you so much for joining me tonight. I think this is going to be a fun week as we get into these different answers. And by all means, if I'm saying something that's not accurate, call me out. I'm not proclaiming to know 100% of the truth. I just know that I'm the type of person that needs to be able to prove what I believe. I need to be able to understand the reasons behind what I believe. And my goal is to impress upon you a similar mentality. And I think that's what we're going to do this week. I think that'll be good to start challenging challenging Babylon, coming out of Babylon, and challenging the doctrine of the harlot that all of us have been exposed to. So if you like this kind of content, like the video, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell so you get notified when we go live. We go live Monday through Friday, 4:30 Pacific time, usually 7:30 Eastern time. The next couple of weeks, we may not be consistent, but we do have a lot of content to publish, so there will still be teachings and stuff that we've done that'll be published. We actually have help now. We have an editor who's helping me out with the channel, who's doing an amazing job. Thank you, Hizzy. Who is just doing an amazing job turning some of the content we've already done into more content for you guys. So look forward to that. We're working on growing the channel and providing better quality content too. So keep coming back. Check out what we're doing. It's going to be a fun week. God bless you guys. Shalom, shalom. And never forget, our God is a mighty God.
Our God is a mighty God. He stands eternal and strong, with power, justice, and truth. Our God is a mighty God. Our God is a mighty God. He stands eternal and strong, with iron and flame, justice forged in the void, light that crushes the dark. Our God is a mighty God. Heavens tear open, worlds tremble at his battle march. Every darkness, every tyrant, every curse will fall when the Messiah rises and announces the final call. He splits the seas with a roar like a lion, commands the legions in celestial will advance. The lightning his hammer, the thunder he wields. He vanquishes evil and makes the broken healed. Our God is a mighty God. He stands in